As we've discussed previously on Don't Talk TV, freedom of speech really doesn't exist in Canada, and it hasn't for some time, although I believe that it did at one point. But now that we're in the midst of an election, it seems that the various leaders of the two big parties are doing what they can to go and beat up on that corpse some more. So we'll have a look at that on today's episode of Don't Talk TV. Hello, my name is Nicholas Wansbutter. I'm a lawyer in Stratford, Ontario, Canada, and welcome to Don't Talk TV. If you're new to this channel, you might be a little bit surprised to see a lawyer in Canada saying boldly that he believes that freedom of speech doesn't even believe in Canada. Doesn't the Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantee freedom of religion, freedom of association, freedom of assembly? Well, if you haven't seen that episode, I highly recommend you watch episode 217. Although to take it to the next level, we have an entire playlist, which we're linking in the show description, on Canada's hate speech laws. But episode 217 is where I went through those laws and made the case that freedom of speech doesn't exist in Canada. At least there's not unlimited freedom of speech. You're allowed to speak about certain things, but there's a growing number of things that you're not allowed to talk about in this country. Otherwise, you will go to jail, and you'll go to jail for years, which is quite remarkable in a country where, as we've covered, you can do crimes that most people, I think, would consider much worse than saying mean things about an identifiable group and not get as much jail time. I mean, drunk driving, for example, generally does not result in jail time if it's your first offense. But even people who've been driving drunk and killed people, killed whole families, they'll spend less time in jail than people who have written nasty things about certain groups online. So again, I recommend episode 217 for the details on that, but suffice to say, my view is freedom of speech isn't just under attack in Canada, it's just dead, and that corpse is getting beaten up on more and more all the time. And there's no time like a federal election campaign for our politicians to go out there and talk about how they're going to take away even more freedom of speech. And as I said in episode 217, I think that's because the majority of Canadians are in favor of the further curtailment of what you're allowed to talk about, especially since, as we see in many of these cases where people get charged by the police, it's not the police actively seeking those individuals out. It's members of the public complaining to the police that this person is saying these things and we want you to investigate it. So this episode, of course, is being posted in the midst of a federal election campaign. So let's have a look at what the two leaders with a realistic possibility of becoming prime minister are saying on the campaign trail with respect to freedom of speech and what they're promising to do to further curtail that. So I've got on screen here a video from Mark Carney's rally in Hamilton on April the 10th of this year. And specifically, we're at the 11:52 mark. And I've put the time-stamped link in the show description. So let's listen to a couple minutes here to what our current prime minister and potential prime minister again in a few weeks is saying on this topic.
Here today, we announced a series of measures on crime. And we announced a series of measures with respect to online harm and other factors. And one of the observations we had, one of the issues we're dealing with, there's many serious issues that we're dealing with respect to crimes of violence, conjugal violence, drugs, fentanyl, others. But one of them is with respect to really just the sea of misogyny, anti-Semitism, hatred, conspiracy theories, this sort of pollution that's online that washes over our virtual borders from the United States. And that's a mild version of that. That's fine.
Just pausing to note that he puts in conspiracy theories in there. So we're not talking about just outlawing hate. We're talking about outlawing so-called conspiracy theories, i.e. believing something other than what the mainstream media says. As we all experienced during COVID, that's essentially what a conspiracy theory is. We'll just watch a little bit more just to get to the punchline where, to show you that I'm not just making this up when he says he's going to make this law.
And take the conspiracy theory and all that. But the more serious things is when it affects how people behave in our society. When Canadians are threatened going to their community centers or their places of worship or their schools, or God forbid, when it affects our children. So my government, if we are elected, will be taking action on those American giants that come across.
So now, of course, we know what he means by threatening people, right? We've seen this before. It's considered threatening when a parent goes and protests or just asks questions at a drag story time. So I think it's clear when he says we're taking action. Bill, I believe it was C-63 that Trudeau brought in that died when he resigned and prorogued Parliament. That'll be making a comeback, maybe even with some more teeth, because we see the things that Prime Minister Carney is talking about. He's promising this on the campaign trail, and I think this is one of those promises you can count on him to follow through on. As we know, there's many promises that get made by politicians on the campaign trail. Very few of them come to fruition, but I think this is one that we can be quite confident will come to fruition on the come to fruition if he's elected. This isn't just empty promises on the campaign trail. But now let's see what is Mr. Poilievre saying, the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, because many people, those who say we have to vote for the Conservatives to get rid of the Liberals, among other things, they'll say it's because they're the ones in favor of free speech. And as we looked at in the live episode recently when I did CBC's Vote Compass, that was alleging that it's part of the Conservative platform that our hate crime laws are too restrictive, they unduly infringe on free speech, and they should be relaxed. And I said that was completely inaccurate. I gave some examples of that. But here's another example. So here we've got Mr. Poilievre. He's talking about what he's going to get tough on. He's specifically talking about how he's going to get tough on certain type of speech. He's going to be talking about thought crime. So let's see what he has to say here.
Direct result of radical liberal policies and divisive rhetoric that has driven our people apart. We will end that. We will bring in tougher laws to target vandalism, hate marches that break laws, violent attacks based on ethnicity and religion. Anyone who's here on a visitor visa who carries out law breaking will be deported from this country. And we will, there will be very serious jail time. And on top of that, fines for anyone who carries out anti-Semitic vandalism or property damage. We need to unite our people. We need to get back to the country we used to.
So we'll just stop that there. I think, he's not talking so much about bringing in new laws per se, but definitely really dropping the hammer on people. And note, he talks about vandalism, that which is already a crime, absent hate crime laws, but he talks about hate marches. So just protesting against things that the government doesn't want you to protest. And I suspect that Mr. Poilievre, given his emphasis on anti-Semitism, has the same sorts of things in mind to criminalize as we've seen with in the past. And again, have a look at that the hate crime playlist that we've got. You'll have plenty of examples of exactly what the focus is and what's prosecuted, what's criminalized under these hate crime laws and what isn't. So I don't want to keep beating a dead horse myself. That's what I'm accusing our politicians of doing. I won't belabor that myself, other than just coming full circle back to what we started with, that we don't have free speech in this country. The major political parties are intent, it would seem, from what they're saying on the campaign trail, on further curtailing that. and narrowing even more what you're allowed to speak about, at least in public. As I've said before, so far you're still allowed to discuss in private pretty much whatever you want. Now, whether that will change, we'll have to see. And what is the definition of private? That may become an interesting question when it comes to, say, group chats on something like Signal. How many people need to be in a Signal group chat before it's not considered private conversation anymore? How many people need to be present at a private gathering in one's house before that's considered not private? That may be an interesting area that they'll take things in the future. But for now, what we do know is that they're planning on taking this even further than they have. So, of course, this show is not legal advice. If you need legal advice, you should call a lawyer, and you can get specific advice to the particular circumstances that you're dealing with. If you want me to be that lawyer, my contact information is listed below. If there's topics you'd like to see us cover, we're always interested in hearing your questions and suggestions. So please send an email to the email address listed below, and or you can leave a comment in the comment section. And if you found this episode at all interesting, helpful, or informative, please spread the word. Follow us, share us, like us. We're trying to beat the algorithms. I mean, I don't know if we're being shadow banned, as I've said many times before. There's people way more controversial than me that have hundreds of thousands of subscribers. We can't get past 8.5 thousand for whatever reason. But if you like our content, please consider subscribing, because if we can get over 10,000, then we can really start getting the word out more.